Hi, this is Mrs. Carnes. This video is going to be talking about triangle congruence by SSS, which means side, side, side. Now in the last video when we were talking about congruent triangles or congruent figures, we were told that we had to have all three pairs of angles and all three pairs of sides to be congruent before you could state that the two triangles were congruent. So if you knew that side AB was congruent to side FE, and you knew side AC was congruent to side FD, and you knew side BC was congruent to ED, and you knew that angle A was congruent to angle F, angle B was congruent to angle E, and angle C was congruent to angle D. If you knew all six of those things were true, then you would be able to say that triangle ABC was congruent to triangle FED. But you had to know all six, all three pairs of sides and all three pairs of angles. However, there is a little bit of an easier way to prove that two triangles are congruent. You don't need all that information. It's actually enough to just know if the three sides are congruent. So what we have is called the side, side, side postulate, or we call it SSS for short. It states, if three sides of one triangle are congruent to three sides of another triangle, then the triangles are considered to be congruent. So now you know that you only have to prove that the three sides of one triangle are congruent to the three sides of another triangle. So if we take a look at these two triangles, triangle BOW and triangle MAN. These two triangles, if we were trying to prove that they were congruent to each other, we would look at them and say they're clearly congruent to each other because we know that segment BO is congruent to segment MA by it was given to us. We know that segment BW is congruent to segment MN, again, because the picture gives that information to us. And we also know that segment OW is congruent to segment AN. And since we know that those three sides, all of those are sides, since those three sides are congruent to each other, then we can state that triangle BWO is congruent to triangle MNA. And we know that because of the side, side, side postulate. And so now we're going to take this information and we're going to turn this into that two-column proof that we worked on in the last video. So here's a proof. Basically, it'll give you a picture, and it'll have some information marked on it, and it'll also have something that they've given you. They're going to have some information that they're going to outright give you to use. And then they're going to ask you to prove something. So what they've given us is they're telling us that NQ, segment NQ, is congruent to segment PQ. Now when I come to my picture and I find NQ and PQ, they already have the congruent symbols marked on there. So I can say, okay, my picture already shows that also. I can also know that NY, segment NY, is congruent to segment PY. So NY and PY, those are also congruent, and again, it shows that on my picture already. They want me to prove that triangle NQY, this triangle, is congruent to triangle PQY. And so to do that, I have to figure some things out. Now I could prove that all three sides and all three angles were congruent, and then I'd be able to show that those two triangles were congruent. But we just found that there is actually a shorter way of doing it. As long as I can come up with the three pairs of congruent sides, then I know that those two triangles are congruent. Now you always want to start with what was given to you. So I'm going to restate the two pieces that were given to me. We know that NQ, segment NQ, is congruent to segment PQ. How do we know that? because it was given to us. That's the reason. It was just given. We also know that segment NY is congruent to segment PY, again, because it was given to us. Now, I always go back and off to the side, I kind of make a little note that I have one side that is congruent and I have a second side that is congruent. That information helps me know when I have enough of the information to be able to prove that these two triangles are congruent. And right now I don't. I have two S's and I actually know that I need a third side to be able to prove that. Now when I look at my picture though, I go, well, it doesn't state that that third side, this QY and QY, it doesn't state that they're congruent. But because it's the same line, we can actually state that they are. So what we say is we say in our statement, we can say that QY, segment QY, is congruent to segment QY, it's the same segment, and it's by the reflexive property. The reflexive property, if you remember, the reflexive property states that a segment is congruent to itself. And so since that is the same line, we can actually state that. Now I'm going to mark my picture so that I know that that is congruent to itself. And then I'm also going to come and mark my proof and show that I have this is also a side. Now that I have three S's, I now can stop any more of my reasoning. I can come straight directly to what they want me to prove. They want me to prove that those two triangles are congruent. So in my statement, I can say triangle NQY is congruent to triangle PQY. And how do we know that? By the side, side, side postulate. And now you know that your proof is complete. Now you might want to go back and try a few more of these because they're not all going to be the same. Not all of them are going to have the reflexive property that's going to be used in every proof. Some of them might have different things like definition of midpoint or definition of angle bisector. And so there's lots of things that you're going to have to become familiar with. Again, the best way to become good at doing triangle congruence proofs is to just practice them over and over again and see all the different types of how to do it. I will tell you that you will always want to list your given. You will always want to list this information, and your last statement, your last line should always be what you are setting out to prove. So this statement and this statement should always match up. These two statements right here. Excellent job. Keep practicing.